I've got two beers. One's for drinking, the other is for the barbecue. Stay tuned. So welcome to Silly Bubba's Barbecue. Growing up in the Midwest, I'm used to all different kinds of flavors of barbecue. And oftentimes my relatives would use beer in their barbecue. And so that's what I'm going to use today. They oftentimes used it as like a marinade, or they would use it as a mustard slather. But what's nice is that the beer that was in the slather or marinade that they used, you could taste some of the flavors being imparted to the protein. And so that's what I'm trying to imitate a little bit of today. I'm also going to show you how I make a beer-inspired barbecue sauce. You can see a central theme here, beer throughout, right? It's the weekend, people like beer. Why not drink a cold beer? You got any left over, which I know is rare for most people, but hey, let's see what we can do and make a nice sauce. We can infuse that into our slather and so forth. Now you might be wondering, well, what in the world is a slather? Maybe you've heard the term binder before, where people oftentimes will take a rack of ribs, they'll put like a layer of oil or mustard on top of the ribs, and the purpose of that is allowing the rub to stick to the surface of the meat. Well, with slathers, it can accomplish the same thing, but also it imparts more flavor. And in fact, I've already made a slather that I'll be using right here in this container. And in this container, it's basically some mustard, some of the Yuengling beer from another bottle that I have, a little bit of garlic powder, hot sauce, brown sugar, a little bit of Worcestershire sauce or Worcestershire or Worcestershire, however you want to pronounce it, depending on what part of the country or the world that you're from. But anyway, that will impart flavor. And I chose to go with Yuengling today because my family drinks it a lot. I know some people like the hoppier kinds of beers, and that's fine. This one's mellow, has some caramel overtones to it, and so that kind of will go well with the barbecue sauce that I'm going to make later, and I'll show you how I make that. So let's get these ribs trimmed up. All right, so time for me to trim these ribs now. And you know what? I tell you what, every time you go to the grocery store, you're going to get something different. So with this particular rack of ribs, as you can see, pretty nice on this side of things, but on this side, very thin, very thin. So I'll see what I can do. I'll work with it. You never know what you're going to get. So I like to start on the back side. And on the back side, we've got some trimming to do. So you've got this flap here. Some people call it a skirt flap, or the diaphragm is basically what it is. And so I'm not going to eat that. You can if you'd like. Maybe it's a nice snack. I know some people on YouTube like to say that, hey, it's a nice snack while you're cooking. Well, I'd just rather eat the ribs, but that's just me. So I'm going to trim this off. Very important to have a sharp knife. In fact, I sharpened my knives last night because it had been a while, and I'm oftentimes out here cutting. So I'm going to get these trimmed up a bit. All right. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so I'm not going to be overly crazy about this rack of ribs, but there are some things that I do want to trim down. I'm going to trim a little bit of this down because I want it to be even. As I've said in previous videos, if you have a lot of sharp edges or unevenness when you're barbecuing, when you're cooking, the heat tends to find those areas and it dries them out. So with basically anything you're putting into a smoker, kettle grill, if you're going to be cooking it for an extended amount of time, you want to make sure that whatever protein you're putting in is aerodynamic. And that's because the heat then will kind of roll over the meat and won't stick on like a corner or a thin edge as much. You'll get more even cooking. So with that being said, I'm going to trim just a little bit of this down. I don't like the mountain peak that I'm seeing here right now. So I'm going to try to make this a little bit more even. I'm going to come up here where the rib tips would be, or are, I should say. Now, that's something that I can actually save for later, and I like rib tips. And growing up in the Midwest, that was a huge thing for me. So I'm going to thin this out a little bit. All right. Okay. So I'll use a little bit of that later. So this is going to be a thin rack of ribs here, as you can see. Now, membrane is one thing. A lot of people trim the membrane off. I'll show you an easy way to get it off. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go under here with this. And I'm going to try to raise that up. Get it under there like that. See how that works? Right in the middle. And I'm going to pull that off. Sometimes it comes off cleanly, sometimes it doesn't. So, but there you go. All right. It's not bad. This is a thin edge here. I just kind of take that off because that will burn. There's a little bit of the membrane on. Doesn't really matter. But if you'd like, you can just take a paper towel and take some of that off. All right, it's not bad. All right, but again, you can see kind of how the butcher mangled this rack of ribs here. So there's some bone protrusion, some bone cracking, and so forth. Now, at this point, now I'm gonna put on my mustard slather. So I'll just take a brush and lightly apply some to the back. Now this is going to impart some flavor, so I'm looking forward to that. This is an experiment today for me. I've never made this particular kind of mustard slather. You don't need a whole lot. You just need enough for it to be a little tacky on the back. And you can see what my mustard slather looks like. So again, a little bit of beer, brown sugar, Worcestershire sauce, a little bit of garlic. All right. And now I'm going to apply my rub. Now my rub, if you followed me in previous videos, I like to use a base rub and then I add certain ingredients to make it more regional. So that's kind of what I did with this one. I'm kind of going with like a South Carolina type of style. So I have my base rub and then I've added some ground mustard to it and a few other things. And I'll put that in the description. But again, I hold my seasoning up about 8-10 inches or more. And that allows me to get good, even coverage over the surface of the meat. Okay. Now you don't rub. I know it's called a rub, and people sometimes will mistakenly rub their meat across, or rub the rub across the meat. That's the last thing in the world you want to do, because then you'll get uneven coating and things will end up in pockets, and you don't want that. But if you'd like to, you can just press it in, just like that. Just press it in. All right. Now this is the presentation side. One quick thing here too, this is another part that's just going to burn up. This is not going to be desirable for anyone. So I'm going to take care of that as well. Come in here, cut that off. Again, nice thing about this too is that I've got these rib tips now that I'm going to have with my meal. I'm looking forward to that. Love rib tips. But this kind of stuff here, as you can see, I mean, look at it. It's really thin. It's not going to do much at all, so I'm just going to take it off. Okay. All right. There's more I could do to this rack of ribs. I'm just not going to. It is what it is. This is not the best rack of ribs in the world. My kids are away this weekend, though, so it's just my wife and I eating these. So this should be plenty. It's not pretty, but I'm more concerned with the flavor this weekend. So again, putting my binder, not my binder, well, it is sort of a binder, but my mustard slather on these ribs. All right. Again, don't need a lot, but make sure that it's coated, okay? All right, now come across with my rub. Again, this is a southern kind of rub, like a South Carolina style rub. I'll put the ingredients in there. in the comment section if you'd like to. So I'm going to apply actually a little bit more rub. I want it a little heavier on top. Okay. Little trick for you too. If you'd like to put the ribs on really quickly after this, then patting it in will help. Like, let's say if you don't have enough time to see it sweat, but you want it to sweat a little bit more. And what I mean by that is the salts in the rub will actually cause some of the moisture to seep up to the surface of the meat. At the same time, it allows the spices to penetrate. Well, let's say if you need to cook here really soon and you don't have a lot of time, then of course patting the rub in, like I'm doing right now, will help that process because you want as much flavor as possible. What I like to do with my ribs oftentimes, and I know a lot of people have different thoughts about this, I like to let my ribs sit the night before in the refrigerator. Now, I know I've heard everywhere and I've seen people say it, and it's actually happened to me too, that sometimes if you apply a really salty rub to your ribs and you let them sit overnight, sometimes they can turn out like they're cured or hammy. I've seen that happen, but with my particular rubs that I use, they don't contain an inordinate amount of salt. It's early, can't talk this morning. So you're not getting that cure, at least I've noticed. But what I like though is when I let the rub sit overnight, especially sitting on this slather, I get a better flavor. I get better flavor penetration throughout the ribs, and it just tastes great. And again, by not using too much salt, it doesn't cure the meat. And so that's what I'm going for right here. As far as the ingredients and why I pick what ingredients I use in my rubs, that kind of information you'll find shortly. I'm starting a barbecue group called the Smokers Guild, and that will explain my thought, my rationale behind my seasonings, my sauces, because I want to get you to the goal where you can make your own seasonings and sauces. But that's a video for another day. So I'll get these rib tips also cleaned up and seasoned, and I'll see you in a moment. And here we go. Here's what the ribs look like right now. You can tell really nice, rich mahogany flavor. And these guys are going to go in the refrigerator. Here's something interesting that I do with them as well. I leave them uncovered. I do not put foil on them overnight. I want the rub to really set up. I want air to hit the top of these ribs. I know there's a thought out there that, oh, it's going to take on the flavors of the refrigerator. It's going to taste really off, but it really doesn't. And I find allowing more air to sit on top of these ribs as they're cooking, or I should say as they're refrigerating, helps with the pellicle or the bark, and it helps with formation. That's what I've found anyway. Personally, it works. Give it a shot. Do what you like to do, but give this a shot and see if it works for you. I've found that it's quite effective. So thanks for hanging with me for the trim, the slather, and the seasoning of these ribs. I've given you a little bit about my methods and what I'm trying to do. And they've been sitting here for about 5 minutes. They look great. They've got that great barbecue color. Again, there's not a whole lot of salt in the rub that I'm using, and so it won't cure the meat, but it'll actually help develop a great pellicle, a great bark in the refrigerator overnight. And I'm about to stick these in the refrigerator here shortly. All right. But as I mentioned to you as well, this recipe also comes with barbecue sauce. And so you'll notice on your screen right now the recipe that I'm using. So there's a lot of ingredients in here. You'll notice one is the beer, but you'll see also the complementary flavors that I'm using as well. Notice the sweeteners that I'm using that complement the beer. Again, the beer has a little bit of caramel overtones, a little taste to it. It's very subtle, and it actually, I mean, you don't think about it, but a beer has a little bit of sweetness in it, and so that works very well with the brown sugar that I'm using. I wanted not just sweet for the sake of sweet. I wanted a sauce that had sweetness with character. So you've got your brown sugar, which has molasses, and that works well with the caramel as well. And then you've also got maple sugar, or maple syrup. So that's more of your earthy kind of sweetness, and that works well with the other sweeteners and the beer that I'm using in this instance. But you'll also notice you've got to have something to complement the sweet, right? You need something that's a little more tart, a little bit more sour. So that's where you start to see some of the other things that I'm using. A little bit of apple cider vinegar. Okay, vinegar is a big part of barbecue, so I've got that in there. As well, a little bit of the mustard is in this particular sauce. Mustard adds a bit of a backbone to barbecue sauce. It's got a little bit of your tartness, but it actually adds a little bit of heat. And then finally, and something that a lot of people may not realize, is that citrus flavors, especially lemon juice, if used in small amounts, lemon juice will actually enhance all of the other flavors in your sauce. Now, if you add too much lemon juice, then of course your sauce will taste lemony, and that's not the recipe that I'm going for today. But in a small amount, again, it enhances the other flavors. So in this recipe, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice is sufficient, or what I like to do, I use a small amount of citric acid. And citric acid is actually found in a lot of your on-the-shelf barbecue sauces that you'll find on the store. And that functions very similar to lemon juice, but you don't use nearly as much. In fact, I just use like a 1/4 teaspoon of that, because if you use too much citric acid, it can become really bitter really fast. So, and then of course you've got your aromatics. You've got your garlic, which I love in barbecue sauce. So this just gives you an idea of my thinking in formulating this sauce. You can try it. If you like different amounts of something, that's fine. But if you want a little bit more information in my thought process and how I make barbecue sauces, I've probably made 40 to 50 barbecue sauces that I regularly use. And by using the same principles, I can come out really close to what I need, and then I'll make a small tweak and it's right where I want it. So I have a method to my madness, and if that's something you're interested in, then pay attention to upcoming videos. I will be mentioning periodically my new barbecue group that I'm setting up, the Smokers Guild, which will give you not just an idea of how to make barbecue sauce, but how to make excellent barbecue sauce. And really, that's something that's awesome if you think about it. Now, you can easily go to the store and buy Sweet Baby Ray's. You can order barbecue sauces online like Blues Hog and some of these others, and they are outstanding barbecue sauces. I bought them, I've tasted them. But you know what? Over the years, I taste barbecue sauces and I think to myself, I want to make my own. Or I taste someone's rub and I think, well, that's really good, but that gives me an idea of the flavors I like so that I can make my own. And there's nothing like going to a picnic or a gathering and people are eating your ribs and they're saying, man, that barbecue sauce is really good. You know, what's the name of it? Where'd you get it from? And you can sit back and say, that's my barbecue sauce. Gives you a sense of pride, right? Makes you the king or queen of your cul-de-sac. And that's what you want. You want that pride. You want to enjoy what you're doing, you know? Now, again, you can buy your own barbecue sauces. I do sometimes, but over the past number of years, more and more, I make my own, and I find so much more fulfillment and enjoyment knowing that I can make my own. There's no difference between you and the people that make their sauces. And oftentimes, they use someone else, like a co-packer or others, to get ideas of what their sauce should look like. But I'm going to show you how you can make your own barbecue the way you want it, according to your favorite flavor profile and what your family likes. And really, that's what it's all about, learning how to barbecue, all right? So the meat's gonna rest in the refrigerator. I'm gonna leave it in there overnight, so join me tomorrow and I'll show you what it looks like. Hey, Cooper. Look at you, buddy. You want some barbecue? Yeah, you smell that smoke, don't you? Ribs are doing really good right now. They're humming along. It's a beautiful day out here in Maryland, by the way. Can't really see here on my Govee, but if you can read the pixels, it's around 230. Starting with a smokier fire. As you can see, there's some white smoke coming out the top, not too much. If you followed any one of my videos before, you know I like to start a little smokier. I find as the meat's sort of cold, basically room temperature, it's a good time to soak up as much smoke as possible. And so as later on in this cook, I will open up the air a little bit more on my intake, on my firebox, clean up the smoke a little bit, and then we're just cooking at that point. But hey, this is a smoker, and I like smoked ribs, so to begin with, I do impart a good amount of smoke. Now, just because you see white smoke doesn't mean it's dirty smoke, so just keep that in mind. But you can tell when it's really dirty because it just looks like a cloud, you know, just horrible, billowy smoke, and sometimes even you'll see brown and so forth in it. But as you can see here, there's smoke, a little bit of white smoke, but this is the good kind, and it's all about balance. So I'll clean this fire up a little bit later on, and we'll check on these ribs. Surface drying out a little bit, so I'm going to spritz it. And if you're curious, my spritz is just a little bit of beer, surprise, surprise there, and some apple cider vinegar. So now I'm at the wrap stage for these ribs. And of course, wrapping the ribs is going to help tenderize it, but it's also going to infuse some of that flavor that I was aiming for from the very beginning. Again, I'm going to be using my barbecue sauce as part of this recipe, one of my barbecue sauces, and that contains some of the beer. So as you can see, the ribs have taken on a really nice color, nice mahogany color there, and that's what you want. You want it to a point where you cannot rub the rub off. It's baked on in a sense. So that's the perfect time to wrap. You can actually see the meat cracking a little bit as well, and that tells you that the rib cook is moving quite along. You want to see that cracking. That's one of the telltale signs of tenderness. So for my wrap ingredients, what I'm going to use, first of all, I'm going to put down about 4 pats of butter. Now, butter typically is used in these wraps for its richness, and so that's what I wanted to do. To that, I'm also going to add about 2 to 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. So you got to have your sweetness. All right. And I know a lot of people use honey, and I do sometimes too, but what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep this kind of simple today. I'm going to use a little bit of the barbecue sauce. I let it sit out to get to room temperature. You don't ever really use cold sauce if you can help it. Don't put cold sauce on your meat at any time. So I'm just going to drizzle lightly some of this sauce. All right. Just if you're looking for amounts, probably a 1/4 cup or so. And then what I'll do is I will put the ribs meat side down in that. Now here's the key. I don't want to steam the ribs. So what I do, I wrap them very tightly. I don't want any space. I want it to braise. I don't want to steam these ribs because we've built up a very nice flavorful bark and I want to keep that. So how you do that is wrapping very tightly. And then I pull this end up like so. Take my hands, crimp the edges. And you might notice too how I was feeling the ribs earlier. you would see my hand coming across the raw meat and so forth. And what I was doing, I was actually feeling for any shards of bones. So, because if there are any, I'd like to actually remove those so that they won't puncture through the foil, and that's where we're at now. So you can see this is wrapped super tight, and that's how you want it. And now it's gonna go back on the pit until it's tender. So for the sake of time, since this is quite the long video, here is what the ribs look like in the foil. They reached an internal temperature of about 205 degrees, so they're plenty tender. And you can look at the bones there. If you wanted to, you could actually twist some of these bones out. I don't like fall off the bone ribs. Honestly, I feel if you want fall off the bone, that's up to you. But, you know, if you want something that's that loose, try pulled pork. That's kind of how I feel. I like the ribs to have some texture. So at this point, I've poured off the liquid that's inside the ribs, or inside the wrapping there. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave it in the foil, and I'm going to lightly sauce the back side of the ribs. All right, you notice some really good color there. Just gonna hit this a little bit. Now I'm gonna flip this over. Get a chance to see what it looks like on the other side. See that color? That's what you want. And by the way, as far as wood, I used today a little bit of maple, cherry, and cherry gives it a really nice color. You wouldn't know it if you've not played with cherry that much, but you know, the color of a cherry, honestly, the wood imparts a similar color, that mahogany barbecue color. And then I also had some oak. The oak imparts flavor, but honestly, it's more of a denser hardwood. And so that was for the purpose of adding BTUs and getting some solid heat. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put these back on the pit for about 10 minutes to let the sauce firm up a bit. And then I'll see you in a minute when it's time to cut. Well, it's all wrapped up. Thank you for hanging with me. I know this was a super long video, but I just wanted you to come along for the ride with me with these beer-infused ribs. And they turned out really good. Have a look at them here. Look at that color. Nice mahogany color, and that's what you want. That's barbecue. When you see that, you think barbecue, don't you? And so that's the nice thing too about putting it on the cooker like I did after the sauce was there. I like my sauce kind of baked on. I don't like it really wet, okay? So now, time to cut them up. It's a trick. If you don't know where the bones are, you can slightly lift the rack and follow it down. Oh wow, see that juice squirting out of there. It's gonna be flavorful. Fat is flavor. All right, that'll be it for now, but let's look at it. Very nice. See that smoke ring? A lot of juice in there. I'm not gonna squeeze it. I don't like squeezing my ribs. I like the juice to stay in there. Turned out really good. Okay, great looking ribs. I like the color, great texture. Leaving the ribs in the refrigerator overnight with not a really salty rub, just a little bit of salt in there, really helped develop the bark. I like it a lot. So now it's time to taste it, see what we're looking at. Really good. Not gonna talk with food in my mouth. Nice bite, as you can see, came right off the bone. Very tender, good flavor throughout, and you can taste the beer as a subtle backdrop to these ribs. So, again, thank you for hanging with me. Again, it's a long video, I realize that, but you're here because you love barbecue, and so do I. So if you like this kind of content, please continue to tune in. I'm going to be coming up with videos every so often showing you my techniques, what I do. I like going in depth, as you saw, as far as what's in my rubs, what's in my sauces. I don't want to leave you with just the responsibility of buying your own sauces and rubs at the store. I want to show you how you can do it so that, again, you can confidently make your own barbecue, put whatever spin on it that you want, and that way you can be proud, you can be happy about what you produce, and you can be confident every time you step in your kitchen or next to your smoker. And again, if you want more in-depth information, stay tuned because I will be giving more details on the Smokers Guild when that goes live. And I look forward to seeing you all there. Enjoy your evening.